The day my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "You will never see Sophie and Liam again," I thought my heart had finally broken for good. 3 weeks later, I was sitting alone at my kitchen table staring at court papers that painted me as a dangerous grandmother. According to Vanessa Reed, I was the problem. I was the one hurting her family. But she didn't know about the letters. She didn't know about the secret phone calls. And she certainly didn't know that when the judge finally heard the whole story, everything she had built on lies would begin to collapse. What happened next changed all of our lives forever. If you've ever loved a child so deeply that you'd fight for them no matter the cost, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Before we continue, please like and subscribe if stories about family resilience and second chances speak to your heart. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone tried to erase you from your grandchildren's lives? Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. People often assume that the worst moments in a family happen all at once, like a thunderstorm crashing through an open window. But in my experience, families rarely break that way. They crack slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Looking back now, I can see the tiny fractures that eventually became a canyon between me and the grandchildren I loved more than life itself. At the time, though, all I saw was a family that seemed blessed. My name is Brooklyn Reed. I was 67 years old when everything fell apart. I live in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. It isn't the kind of place that appears in magazines. We don't have ocean views or luxury neighborhoods. We have tree-lined streets, church bake sales, high school football games, and neighbors who wave when they drive by. It was the kind of place where I had raised my son Ethan, and Ethan was my greatest joy. His father, Richard, died 15 years ago after a long battle with cancer. Losing him nearly destroyed me. For months after the funeral, I would wake up reaching for him before remembering he was gone. The only thing that kept me moving forward was Ethan. At the time, he was in his late 20s, building a career as a project manager for a construction company. I remember worrying about him constantly, not because he was irresponsible. Quite the opposite. Ethan carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Even as a child, he had been the kid who comforted others, the kid who shared his lunch, the kid who worried about everyone else's feelings. When Richard died, Ethan stepped into the role of protector without anyone asking him to. He checked on me daily, fixed things around my house, took me grocery shopping, made sure I wasn't spending every evening alone. I never forgot that. Then one spring afternoon, he called me with excitement in his voice. "Mom," he said, "I met someone." I laughed. "Finally." That someone was Vanessa. The first time I met her, she seemed wonderful. She was charming, polished, and intelligent. She worked in marketing for a regional healthcare company and had a confidence that filled every room she entered. She brought flowers to our first dinner. She complimented my cooking. She asked thoughtful questions about Richard. Most importantly, she seemed to genuinely love Ethan. I remember driving home that night and thinking that my husband would have approved. A year later, they got married. It was a beautiful wedding held at a renovated barn outside the city. The sun was setting when Ethan and Vanessa exchanged vows. I cried through most of the ceremony, not because I was sad, because I was grateful. Grateful that my son had found happiness. Grateful that he wouldn't have to face life alone. For several years, everything seemed exactly as it should be. Then Sophie was born. The moment I held her, my heart expanded in ways I never thought possible. She had Ethan's eyes, those same gentle blue eyes that had melted me since the day he was born. I became the kind of grandmother I had always hoped to be. Not overbearing, not intrusive, just present. When Vanessa returned to work after maternity leave, I helped with childcare. 3 afternoons a week I watched Sophie. We colored pictures, read storybooks, built blanket forts. Sometimes she would curl up beside me on the couch and fall asleep while I read aloud. Those afternoons became some of the happiest moments of my life. Vanessa often thanked me. "Brooklyn, I don't know what we'd do without you," she would say, and I believed her. Years later, when Liam arrived, our family felt complete. Liam was the opposite of Sophie in every way. Where Sophie was thoughtful and observant, Liam was energetic and fearless. He climbed everything, touched everything, asked endless questions. The child seemed powered by pure curiosity. I loved every second of it. As the years passed, family traditions formed naturally. Christmas Eve was always at my house. Every Thanksgiving, Ethan carved the turkey, while Sophie helped me make pies. During summer vacations, I took the kids fishing at a nearby lake. Every birthday was celebrated together. Every school play, every soccer game, every dance recital. I was there. Not because anyone forced me, because I wanted to be, and because they wanted me there too. At least that's what I believed. One memory still lives vividly in my mind. Sophie was 8, Liam was 5. The family had gathered in my backyard for a barbecue. The children were chasing fireflies as the sun disappeared. I sat on the porch watching them. Sophie suddenly ran over and wrapped her arms around me. "Grandma," she said. "Yes, sweetheart. When I grow up, I want to live next door to you." I laughed. "Why?" "So I can visit every day." Then Liam joined the conversation. "I'll live next door too." The three of us laughed together. At that moment, I felt richer than any billionaire alive. Those memories would later become both a comfort and a source of pain. Because when everything changed, I couldn't stop replaying them, searching for clues. Trying to understand how we had gone from that happiness to what eventually happened. The truth is, if someone had warned me back then, I wouldn't have believed them. I wouldn't have believed that one day I would need permission just to speak to those children. I wouldn't have believed that courtrooms, lawyers, and judges would become part of our family story. And I certainly wouldn't have believed that the woman sitting beside me at every holiday dinner would one day try to erase me from my grandchildren's lives. Yet when I think back carefully, I can now see the first tiny signs. They seemed insignificant at the time. Little comments, brief expressions, moments that disappeared almost as quickly as they appeared. Sometimes Vanessa would become unusually quiet when the children ran to me first. Sometimes her smile seemed forced when Sophie asked if she could spend the weekend at Grandma's house. Sometimes I caught a look in her eyes that I couldn't quite understand. Not anger, not exactly. Something deeper, something darker. A feeling I couldn't name. One evening after Liam's 7th birthday party, everyone was helping clean up. I was washing dishes while Vanessa dried them. The kids were laughing in the living room. I smiled as I listened. "They adore you," Vanessa said suddenly. I looked up. "What?" "The kids." She continued drying a plate. "They adore you." I chuckled. "Well, they're wonderful kids." Vanessa smiled, but there was something strange about it, something cold. For just a second, then it vanished, and she went back to normal. At the time, I dismissed it completely. I told myself I was imagining things. I wish I hadn't, because that tiny moment was the first crack, the first warning, the first sign that beneath the perfect family everyone saw on the surface, something dangerous was quietly beginning to grow. And before long, those small cracks would become impossible to ignore. The first rule didn't seem unreasonable. That's why I ignored it. If I had known where it would lead, I might have paid closer attention. A few months after Liam turned 6, Vanessa called me one Tuesday evening. Her voice sounded pleasant enough. "Brooklyn," she said, "I wanted to ask a small favor." "Of course." "We'd appreciate it if you called before stopping by." I laughed softly. "I usually do." "I know. We just want to be more organized." It sounded harmless, responsible even. Families need boundaries. I understood that. "That's completely fair," I told her. The conversation ended pleasantly. And for a while, nothing seemed unusual. Whenever I wanted to visit, I called first. Most of the time, Vanessa said yes. Occasionally, she suggested another day. Again, nothing alarming. At least not yet. Then the rules slowly began multiplying. A few weeks later, I asked if I could take Sophie and Liam for ice cream after school. Vanessa hesitated. We'd rather handle school pickups ourselves. Oh. The answer surprised me. For years, I had helped with pickups whenever Ethan or Vanessa worked late. The children loved those afternoons. Still, I didn't argue. No problem. I told myself parents had the right to make decisions for their children. But the restrictions continued. 1 month later, Sophie invited me to attend a school art fair. I was excited. She had spent weeks talking about a painting she wanted to show me. When I mentioned the event during dinner, Vanessa smiled tightly. Actually, we're keeping that just for immediate family. I blinked. I wasn't sure I understood. Immediate family. Wasn't I family? The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. But Ethan quickly changed the subject. Nobody discussed it again. On the drive home, I kept replaying those words. Just for immediate family. The phrase settled heavily in my chest. For the first time, I felt like an outsider looking through a window. Still, I tried to be understanding. I convinced myself Vanessa was stressed. Her job had become more demanding. The children were getting older. Life was busy. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Then Christmas arrived, and something happened that I couldn't ignore. Every year, I gave the children one special gift from Grandma. Nothing extravagant. Usually books, keepsakes, or experiences. That year, I had purchased matching charm bracelets for Sophie and a personalized compass for Liam. The compass had an engraving. Follow your heart. Love Grandma. When the children opened their presents, they were thrilled. Sophie hugged me immediately. Liam practically shouted with excitement. But across the room, I noticed Vanessa watching, not smiling, not celebrating. Watching. The expression disappeared quickly. Yet I saw it, a flash of irritation. As though my gifts had somehow offended her. Later that evening, while helping clean the kitchen, I overheard a conversation. Vanessa didn't know I was nearby. Mom got them wonderful gifts, Ethan said. They already have enough things. It wasn't about things. I know. The tone in Vanessa's voice was strange, sharp, defensive. I stepped away before hearing more. But something about that exchange lingered with me. Over the next several months, the atmosphere changed further. When I called, Vanessa often answered instead of Ethan. If I asked to spend time with the children, she needed to check the schedule. Sometimes she took days to respond. Other times, she simply never responded at all. One Saturday, I drove to a soccer game where Liam was playing. I sat in my usual spot on the bleachers. Liam spotted me immediately. His face lit up. Grandma, he ran toward me. Before he reached me, Vanessa called him back. Liam, stay with the team. The disappointment on his face broke my heart. The rest of the game, he kept glancing toward me. Afterward, he finally ran over and threw his arms around my waist. I hugged him tightly. I scored a goal. I saw it, sweetheart. For a few wonderful minutes, we talked and laughed. Then Vanessa appeared. We need to go. The words weren't rude, but they weren't warm either. Liam looked disappointed. Can Grandma come get lunch with us? No. The answer came immediately. Not maybe, not another time. Just no. I watched their car disappear from the parking lot, feeling strangely empty. That night, I called Ethan. Is everything okay? There was a long pause. Of course. You sure? Mom, Vanessa's just trying to create structure. Structure. That word again. Everyone seemed to have a different explanation, but none of them explained why I suddenly felt unwanted. Months passed. The distance continued growing. Then came the birthday party that should have been ordinary. Sophie was turning 11. I arrived carrying a homemade cake. Baking had always been our thing. When she was younger, she would stand on a chair beside me and help mix ingredients. As I walked into the house, Sophie ran over excitedly. "Grandma, you made the chocolate one." "Of course I did." She hugged me. Vanessa watched from across the room. For a brief second, I thought I saw annoyance cross her face again. Later, while guests chatted in the backyard, Sophie sat beside me. She lowered her voice. "Grandma?" "Yes. I miss spending time with you." The statement surprised me. "We still see each other." "Not like before." I smiled sadly. "No, sweetheart, not like before." She looked down at her hands. Then she whispered something that made my stomach tighten. "Mom doesn't like it when we talk about you." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" Before Sophie could answer, Vanessa suddenly appeared. "There you are." Her smile seemed forced. Sophie helped me inside. The moment vanished. The conversation ended, but the words remained. "Mom doesn't like it when we talk about you." That sentence haunted me. A few days later, I called Ethan again. This time, I was more direct. "Is Vanessa upset with me?" "No." "Then why does Sophie think she doesn't like me?" Silence. Another long silence. Finally, he sighed. "Mom, please don't make this bigger than it is." "I don't think I am." "Everything's fine." But he didn't sound convincing. In fact, he sounded exhausted, like a man trying to hold together two sides of a rope that were pulling apart. I hated putting him in that position. So, once again, I backed off. I told myself patience was the answer. I told myself love required grace. I told myself families went through difficult seasons. What I didn't realize was that Vanessa's restrictions weren't temporary. They were becoming systematic, deliberate. One by one, opportunities to connect with Sophie and Liam disappeared. Weekend visits, school events, phone calls, family outings. Everything required permission. And permission was becoming harder to get. The woman who once thanked me for helping raise her children now acted as though I were a threat. I couldn't understand why. Not yet. But deep down, a frightening realization had begun forming. This wasn't about scheduling. It wasn't about boundaries. It wasn't about organization. Something else was happening. Something I couldn't see. Something Vanessa was carefully hiding behind polite smiles and reasonable explanations. And before long, the truth would begin revealing itself through the people I loved most, my grandchildren. There is a special kind of heartbreak that comes from watching someone you love disappear while they're still standing right in front of you. That's what was happening to Ethan. At first, the changes were subtle, small enough to explain away. A missed phone call here, a canceled lunch there, a distracted expression during family gatherings. The kinds of things busy adults experience all the time, but eventually the changes became impossible to ignore. One Sunday afternoon, I met Ethan for coffee, or at least I met the version of Ethan that still existed. The coffee shop sat near his office halfway between our homes. When he walked through the door, my heart sank. He looked exhausted, not physically tired, emotionally drained. His shoulders sagged. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Even his smile looked forced. "Mom?" He hugged me, but there was no energy behind it, no warmth, just obligation. We sat down near a window. For a few minutes we talked about ordinary things, weather, work, the children. Then I finally asked, "Are you okay?" His answer came too quickly. "Sure." I stared at him. He looked away. That told me everything. Mothers know. Even when our children are 40 years old, we know. Something was wrong. "Ethan," he sighed. "What?" "You don't look happy." For several seconds, he didn't respond. Instead, he stared into his coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm just tired. Tired from work? Tired from everything. The honesty surprised both of us. I could see it in his face. The words had slipped out before he intended them to. He quickly tried to recover. I mean, you know how life gets. I nodded, but I didn't believe him. Not entirely. The rest of the conversation felt strained. Like a man walking through a minefield, every topic seemed dangerous. Every question made him uncomfortable. When we finally stood to leave, I hugged him. For a moment, he held on tighter than usual, as though he didn't want to let go. Then he stepped back. I'll call you soon. He didn't. 3 weeks passed. No call, no visit, no invitation. Nothing. Meanwhile, my contact with Sophie and Liam continued shrinking. Sometimes, entire weeks passed without hearing their voices. Every time I reached out, there seemed to be a reason. A scheduling conflict, a family commitment, a school activity. At first glance, each excuse sounded reasonable, but together they formed a pattern, and patterns tell stories. One evening I received a call from Carol Jenkins. Brooklyn. Hi, Carol. I saw Ethan today. That immediately caught my attention. Carol worked at a local bank branch. Many residents used it, including Ethan. How did he seem? Carol hesitated. The hesitation worried me. Honestly? Please. He looked stressed. I sat down. What happened? He came in during lunch, and he was asking questions about refinancing. That wasn't unusual. Many families refinanced mortgages. Still, something in Carol's tone suggested there was more. What kind of questions? The desperate kind. My stomach tightened. Carol lowered her voice. He looked worried about money. Money that didn't make sense. Ethan earned a good salary. Vanessa earned a good salary. They owned a comfortable home. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable, or so I thought. That conversation stayed in my mind. A few days later, another piece of the puzzle appeared, this time from Sophie. The call came late in the evening. She sounded nervous. Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. Can I ask you something? Anything. She hesitated. Do grown-ups fight about money? The question startled me. Sometimes. Oh. A pause. Then another question. A lot. My pulse quickened. Why are you asking? Silence, then she answered carefully. No reason. But children rarely ask questions for no reason, especially questions like that. I gently changed the subject. Yet after the call ended, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next week, I finally saw Ethan again. Only briefly. He stopped by my house unexpectedly one Saturday afternoon. I nearly dropped the watering can when I saw him pulling into the driveway. Ethan. He smiled weakly. Hey, Mom. For a few minutes, we sat on my back porch. It felt almost normal, until I noticed him staring into the distance, lost in thought. Ethan. What's going on? He rubbed his face. Nothing. The answer sounded automatic, practiced. I had heard it too many times. Please stop telling me nothing. For a moment, his composure cracked. I saw genuine emotion flash across his face. Pain, frustration, fear. Then it disappeared. Mom, I don't want you involved. Involved in what? The question hung between us. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked toward the street, then back at me. For one hopeful second, I thought he was finally going to tell me the truth. Instead, he stood up. I should go. My heart sank. Ethan. He stopped walking. I love you. The words seemed to hit him hard. His shoulders slumped. Without turning around, he replied quietly. I know. Then he left. I sat on the porch long after his car disappeared. Something was deeply wrong, not only with Vanessa, Not only with the children, with Ethan too. The strongest clue arrived several weeks later. By accident, I was attending one of Liam's soccer games. Vanessa barely acknowledged me. That wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual happened afterward. Parents gathered near the parking lot while the children celebrated a win. I overheard two women talking. They didn't realize I could hear them. Poor Ethan. Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Pressure, I listened carefully. He works nonstop. And she's always spending. The other woman nodded. Must be exhausting. My heart began pounding. Before I could hear more, they noticed me and stopped talking. The conversation ended immediately, but the damage was done. Questions filled my mind. What? Spending what pressure? What were they referring to? That evening, I called Ethan again. This time he answered after several attempts. Mom, can we talk? A pause. About what? The truth. Silence. Long silence. Then, I'm busy. Ethan. Another pause. And then, for the first time in months, I heard genuine emotion break through his carefully controlled voice. I'm trying my best. The words sounded raw, almost desperate. My eyes filled with tears. I know you are. I'm really trying. I know. His breathing grew shaky. Then he suddenly ended the call. Just like that. No goodbye. Nothing. I stared at my phone. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it told me more than all our previous talks combined. My son was drowning. The only question was why. A week later, I received an answer I wasn't expecting. Not from Ethan, not from Vanessa, from Liam. It happened during one of his secret tablet calls. He was talking excitedly about a school project when he suddenly stopped. Then he frowned. Grandma? Yes? Why doesn't Dad smile anymore? The innocence of the question shattered me. What do you mean? He used to smile all the time. Liam looked down. Now he mostly looks sad. I struggled to find words. Children notice everything, even when adults think they're hiding it, especially when adults think they're hiding it. Before I could respond, Liam quietly added, Sometimes Mom gets mad when Dad talks to you. My breath caught. What? He immediately looked nervous, as though he'd said too much. I didn't mean, Liam. But it was too late. Fear appeared in his eyes. I gotta go. The call ended. I sat frozen, replaying those words over and over. Sometimes Mom gets mad when Dad talks to you. That wasn't jealousy. That wasn't normal family tension. That was control. And for the first time, I began wondering whether Vanessa's behavior wasn't focused solely on me. Maybe she wasn't just isolating the children. Maybe she was isolating Ethan too. The thought terrified me. Because if it was true, then the family I loved was already far more broken than I realized. And soon, Ethan would try to tell me something that would confirm my worst fears. Only he wouldn't get the chance. The day Liam turned 9 should have been one of the happiest days of the year. Instead, it became the day I finally understood how far Vanessa was willing to go. For weeks, I had been planning Liam's birthday. Not because anyone asked me to, because that was what grandmothers do. We remember the little things, the details others overlook, the things children mention once and assume adults will forget. A few months earlier, Liam had told me he wanted to be an astronaut, not a baseball player, not a firefighter, an astronaut. For weeks after that conversation, I searched for the perfect gift. Eventually, I found a beautiful telescope. Nothing extravagant, just large enough for a curious 9-year-old boy to explore the night sky. I imagined his face when he opened it, the excitement, the questions, the endless conversations that would follow. I couldn't wait. I also spent days putting together something even more meaningful, a photo album. Inside were pictures from every year of Liam's life. His first birthday, his first bicycle, fishing trips, Christmas mornings, school plays, family vacations. Every page told the story of a little boy who had always been deeply loved. I wanted him to know that children need reminders, especially when life becomes confusing. The birthday party was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. I received no invitation, but that wasn't unusual anymore. For nearly a year, invitations had become optional. I usually learned about family events through Ethan or the children themselves. This time, I decided not to wait. I bought the telescope, wrapped the photo album, ordered a custom birthday cake decorated with planets and stars. Then I drove to Ethan's house. Part of me was nervous. Part of me was hopeful. I kept telling myself that no mother would stop a grandmother from attending a child's birthday. Surely not. Surely there was still some line Vanessa wouldn't cross. I was wrong. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I sensed something was off. Cars lined the street. Colorful balloons decorated the mailbox. Children's laughter floated from the backyard. The party had already begun. I carried the gifts toward the front door, smiling despite my nerves. Then I knocked. A few seconds passed. Nothing. I knocked again. This time I heard movement inside. Footsteps. The sound of someone approaching. The door opened. Vanessa stood there. The smile disappeared from my face immediately, because hers was already gone. No greeting, no surprise, no warmth, just a cold expression. Vanessa. Brooklyn. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I held the gifts awkwardly in my arms. Finally, I smiled. I'm here for Liam's birthday. Her expression didn't change. Now isn't a good time. I actually laughed, not because anything was funny. Because I thought she must be joking. The party was happening right behind her. Children were literally running through the house. What do you mean? We're having a private celebration. I stared at her. My brain struggled to process the words. Private. Yes. The front door opened a little wider. Behind her, I could see guests. Neighbors, parents, children, people who weren't family. Yet somehow I wasn't welcome. Vanessa? I tried to remain calm. I brought gifts. That wasn't necessary. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not necessary. As though my love for Liam was an inconvenience. As though I were some stranger trying to force my way inside. Before I could respond, a familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Grandma, Liam. His face appeared behind Vanessa. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. Grandma. He started running toward the door. For one beautiful second, everything else disappeared. Then Vanessa stepped directly into his path. Liam! The tone stopped him instantly. But Grandma's here. His smile faded. Go back to the party. The disappointment on his face nearly shattered me. Mom! Now! Liam lowered his head and obeyed. I watched him walk away. Every instinct inside me screamed to follow him, to push past Vanessa, to hug my grandson, to tell him I loved him. Instead, I stood frozen, because causing a scene would only hurt him more. Then something happened that I'll never forget. A small face appeared in the upstairs window. Sophie. The moment she saw me, she pressed both hands against the glass. Her eyes widened. Then she started waving frantically, not happily, desperately, as though she couldn't believe I was there, as though she couldn't believe I wasn't being allowed inside. I raised my hand, trying not to cry. Vanessa noticed. She turned, saw Sophie, then immediately pulled the curtain closed. The window went dark. My heart broke, right there, standing on that front porch, holding a telescope and a photo album, watching a curtain close between me and the children I loved. I looked back at Vanessa. Please. The word came out barely above a whisper. Just let me give Liam his gifts. No. Her answer was immediate, Cold. Final. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. He's my grandson. And I'm his mother. The message couldn't have been clearer. She wasn't protecting her children. She was claiming ownership of them, as if they were possessions, as if love itself required permission. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then another voice interrupted. "Brooklyn." I turned. It was Carol Jenkins. She lived only 3 houses away and had been invited because her granddaughter attended school with Liam. The look on her face told me she'd seen enough to understand exactly what was happening. "Everything okay?" Vanessa answered before I could. "Just a misunderstanding." Carol glanced at the unopened gifts in my arms, then at my face, then at Vanessa. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think it is." An uncomfortable silence followed. Vanessa clearly wanted Carol gone. Carol clearly wasn't leaving. For the first time all afternoon, I felt slightly less alone. Still, the damage had already been done. I looked toward the house one last time, toward the place where Liam was celebrating his birthday without me, toward the place where Sophie was likely wondering why I wasn't coming inside. Then I handed the gifts to Vanessa. "Please make sure he gets these." She hesitated, then took them. I wasn't even certain she would give them to him. That thought hurt more than I can describe. Without another word, I walked back to my car. I managed to start the engine, managed to drive 2 blocks. Then I pulled over and cried. Not quietly, not gracefully, the kind of crying that comes when your heart finally accepts what your mind has been denying. For almost a year, I had been making excuses. Telling myself Vanessa was stressed. Telling myself things would improve. Telling myself patience would solve everything. But sitting in that car, I could no longer lie to myself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't temporary. Vanessa was actively removing me from my grandchildren's lives, and she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Later that evening, Carol called. Her voice sounded troubled. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Carol hesitated. Then she said the words that kept me awake all night. "Brooklyn, what happened today wasn't the first time." "What do you mean?" "There have been arguments." My pulse quickened. "Arguments?" "At Ethan's house." I sat upright. Carol lowered her voice. "More than people realize." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Because suddenly all the pieces I'd been collecting for months seemed connected. The secret phone calls, Sophie's fear, Liam's sadness, Ethan's exhaustion. And now this. Something was happening behind those closed doors. Something much bigger than my relationship with Vanessa. And soon, a letter hidden inside a school backpack would reveal just how serious the situation truly was. For 3 days after Liam's birthday, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie standing behind that upstairs window. I saw Liam's face when Vanessa ordered him away from the front door. I heard Carol's warning over and over. There have been arguments. The words echoed through my mind. Arguments about what money control the children, or something even worse I didn't know. Not yet. What I did know was that the family I loved was unraveling, and I seemed powerless to stop it. Then, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Rebecca Miller, Sophie's teacher. I knew Rebecca well. She had taught Sophie for 2 years and occasionally attended community events. She wasn't a close friend, but she was someone I respected. I answered immediately. "Rebecca, Mrs. Reed." Her voice sounded nervous. "Please call me Brooklyn." There was a pause. Then she lowered her voice. "Brooklyn, I need to speak with you." My stomach tightened instantly. "Is Sophie okay?" "She's physically fine." Physically, the word alarmed me. "What's going on?" "Could we meet?" I sat upright. When? Today. The urgency in her voice left no room for misunderstanding. Something serious had happened. An hour later, I arrived at a small coffee shop near Sophie's school. Rebecca was already there. She looked uncomfortable, as though she wasn't sure whether she should even be having this conversation. The moment I sat down, I knew this wasn't about grades, or attendance, or school activities. This was something else, something bigger. "Rebecca," I said softly. "What happened?" She looked around to make sure nobody was listening. Then she reached into her purse. My heart started pounding. When her hand emerged, she was holding a folded envelope. The handwriting on the front instantly stole my breath. I recognized it. Sophie's. "She asked me to give this to you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I simply stared at the envelope. My 12-year-old granddaughter had written me a secret letter. A letter she apparently couldn't deliver herself. "How did you get this?" Rebecca sighed. "She slipped it into one of her assignments last week." My chest tightened. "Last week," Rebecca nodded. "At first, I thought it was homework." Her voice softened. "But when I opened it, I realized it was meant for you." I carefully took the envelope. My hands were trembling. "Did you read it?" Rebecca looked ashamed. "Only the first few lines." I nodded. I couldn't blame her. Teachers worry when children appear distressed. Slowly, I opened the letter. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. The sight of Sophie's handwriting nearly brought me to tears before I even read a word. Then I began reading. "Dear Grandma, I'm sorry I haven't called lately. Mom gets angry when she finds out. Sometimes she checks everything. Phones, messages, even our rooms." I stopped breathing. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I wiped them away and continued. "I miss you every day. Liam misses you too. He asks about you all the time. Mom tells us not to talk about you. She says you are trying to turn us against her. But you never do that. You always tell us to love our parents. You always tell us families should stay together." I pressed my hand against my mouth. The tears came faster. Not because of what Sophie wrote, because she understood. Even through everything she understood. I continued reading. "Sometimes Liam cries after he talks about you. Mom gets mad when he asks to visit. Sometimes Dad argues with Mom about it. They fight more than they used to. Dad doesn't know everything." The sentence made me freeze. There it was. The same line she had almost said during our phone call. The same unfinished warning. Dad doesn't know everything. My heartbeat quickened. I kept reading. I don't know what to do. I don't want anyone to get in trouble. But I don't think things are okay. Please don't stop loving us. Please don't give up on us. We love you. Love, Sophie." At the bottom of the page, there was one final sentence written smaller than the rest, almost as though she had added it at the last second. "Grandma Dad doesn't know everything Mom says about you." I stared at those words, again and again and again. The coffee shop around me disappeared. The conversations, the music, the people. Everything faded away because suddenly all of the puzzle pieces I'd been collecting started forming a picture. Vanessa wasn't simply limiting visits. She wasn't simply creating boundaries. She was telling the children things. She was telling Ethan things that weren't true, things she apparently didn't want challenged. I looked up at Rebecca. "Has Sophie said anything at school?" Rebecca hesitated. The hesitation terrified me. "What is it?" "I need to be careful." "I understand." Another pause. Then Rebecca leaned forward. "Sophie worries constantly." My chest tightened. "About what?" "Everyone." I felt my heart breaking all over again. "She worries about Liam." Rebecca nodded. "She worries about her father." Another nod. "And she worries about you." The tears returned. Rebecca continued carefully. "She's become very protective." protective, almost like she's carrying responsibilities that belong to adults. That observation hit me hard, because it was true. The Sophie I knew had always been mature, but lately she sounded burdened, like a child trying to hold together a family she couldn't fix. Rebecca reached across the table. I shouldn't say much more. You don't have to. But I wanted you to know something. I waited. Then she said the words I would never forget. Sophie lights up every time she talks about you. The tears spilled freely now. Really? Rebecca smiled. Every single time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she added something else. Whatever is happening, that little girl loves you very much. I looked down at the letter again, at the careful handwriting, at the desperate honesty, at the evidence of a child trying to be brave. And in that moment, something changed inside me. For months, I had been reacting, trying to survive, trying to understand, trying to avoid conflict. But now, I had proof. Not legal proof, not courtroom proof, but emotional proof. Proof that my grandchildren still trusted me. Proof that they still needed me. Proof that walking away would only leave them more alone. That night, I read Sophie's letter at least 20 times. Each reading revealed something new. A hidden fear, a subtle clue, a warning. Most of all, one sentence kept drawing my attention. Dad doesn't know everything. What didn't Ethan know? What had Vanessa been hiding? Why was Sophie so certain her father was unaware I didn't have answers? But for the first time, I had a direction. And deep in my heart, I knew something else. Sophie's letter was only the beginning. Because if Vanessa was willing to hide things from Ethan, manipulate the children, and isolate them from me, then whatever secret she was protecting had to be far bigger than I imagined. And soon, that secret would begin revealing itself through the person I feared for most. My son. After reading Sophie's letter, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Every sentence seemed to point back to him. Dad doesn't know everything. The words haunted me. Whatever Vanessa was doing, Sophie clearly believed her father wasn't seeing the full picture. That meant one of two things. Either Ethan was being deceived, or he was too overwhelmed to notice what was happening around him. Neither possibility gave me much comfort. Over the following weeks, I tried reaching him several times. Most of my calls went unanswered. When he did respond, his messages were brief. Busy today? Talk later? Work is crazy. Nothing unusual on the surface. Yet something felt terribly wrong beneath it all. Then one Friday evening, my phone rang just after midnight. The sound jolted me awake. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then I saw the caller ID, unknown number. My stomach immediately tightened. Nobody delivers good news after midnight. I answered. Hello. A man's voice responded. Is this Brooklyn Reed? Yes. I'm calling from Riverside Medical Center. Everything inside me froze. My blood turned cold. There has been an accident involving your son, Ethan Reed. The room began spinning. I gripped the edge of my nightstand. Is he alive? A pause. The longest pause of my life. Yes. I nearly collapsed with relief. He's stable. Stable. The word felt like oxygen. I quickly dressed and drove to the hospital. The entire trip blurred together. Red lights, street signs, rain on the windshield. I barely remember any of it. All I remember is praying, please let him be okay. Please let him be okay. Please. When I arrived at the emergency department, I rushed inside. The waiting room was crowded despite the late hour. Nurses moved quickly through the hallways. Monitors beeped somewhere in the distance. The entire place felt tense. I approached the front desk. My son is Ethan Reed. The nurse checked her screen, then nodded. He was admitted about an hour ago. Can I see him? Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. Absolutely not. I turned, and there stood Vanessa. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest. Her expression looked more irritated than worried. The sight stunned me. Her husband had just been involved in an accident, yet she looked angry. Not frightened, not emotional. Angry. Vanessa, what are you doing here? The question almost made me laugh. What am I doing here? He's my son. We're handling this. The words came out sharp, dismissive, as though I were intruding on a private meeting instead of worrying about my child. I forced myself to stay calm. How badly is he hurt? He's fine. The answer came too quickly, too casually. Then why was he admitted? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked away. That tiny hesitation told me more than her words ever could. Something wasn't right. A nurse approached us. Family members may visit briefly. I stepped forward. Vanessa stepped in front of me. No, the nurse blinked. I'm sorry. He's exhausted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He needs rest. The nurse looked confused. Then she glanced at me. Ma'am, I'm his mother. The nurse's expression softened. I think a brief visit would be okay. Vanessa's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, she turned away. Without another word, she walked toward the vending machines. The nurse quietly led me down a hallway. My heart pounded harder with every step. Room 314. The nurse opened the door, and there he was, my son. The sight broke my heart. Bruises covered part of his face. A bandage wrapped around his forehead. One arm rested in a sling. Machines monitored his vital signs. He looked exhausted, broken, older than 42. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. Ethan. His eyes opened slowly. The moment he saw me, something changed. Relief, pure relief. Mom! I hurried to his bedside. Tears filled my eyes. Oh, Ethan. I'm okay. His voice sounded weak. Don't do that to me. A faint smile appeared. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months, sus. I'm sorry. I took his hand carefully. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me since the hospital called. What happened? His expression darkened immediately. The change was impossible to miss. It was just an accident. I knew that answer. The same answer. The same avoidance. The same wall. I squeezed his hand. Ethan. He looked away. For several seconds, odd silence filled the room. Then he whispered something unexpected. Things have been hard. My breath caught. Finally. A crack in the wall. What kind of hard? His eyes filled with exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone caring too much for too long. I don't know anymore. The words barely escaped his lips. I had never heard my son sound so defeated. Never. Not even when his father died. Not even during layoffs. Not even during financial struggles. This was different. This was deeper. I leaned closer. You can tell me. His eyes met mine. And for one brief moment, I thought he might. I thought everything was about to come spilling out. The money problems, the arguments, the children, Vanessa, all of it. Instead, the door suddenly opened. Vanessa walked in. The change in Ethan was immediate. His shoulders stiffened, his expression closed. The wall returned. I noticed it instantly. So did Vanessa. She looked from him to me, then smiled. The smile never reached her eyes. How's he doing? Nobody answered. The tension inside that room became suffocating. For several awkward minutes, Vanessa remained there, watching, listening, controlling the conversation without saying much at all. Eventually, she stepped outside to take a phone call. The second the door closed, Ethan grabbed my wrist. The movement startled me. His grip wasn't strong, but it was urgent, desperate. "Mom!" I leaned closer. "What is it?" His eyes darted toward the door, making sure Vanessa wasn't there. Then he whispered words that would change everything. "Don't let her take them away from you." I froze. My entire body went cold. "What?" His breathing became uneven. "The kids?" "Ethan, promise me." My heart pounded violently. "What are you talking about?" For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to explain. Needed to explain. Then his eyes closed briefly, as though he were fighting exhaustion, or fear, or both. When he opened them again, tears shimmered there. Actual tears. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen my son cry. "Promise me." My voice trembled. "I promise." The relief that crossed his face nearly destroyed me, because it wasn't relief for himself. It was relief for Sophie and Liam. The door opened again. Vanessa returned. The conversation ended instantly. Whatever Ethan had been about to reveal vanished, lost behind silence, lost behind fear, lost behind exhaustion. An hour later, a nurse informed me visiting hours were over. I hugged Ethan carefully. "I love you." "I love you too, Mom." The words sounded heavier than usual, as though he needed me to hear them, as though he wasn't certain when we'd have another chance. When I finally left the hospital, dawn was beginning to break. The sky glowed pale gray. Rain still covered the streets, yet I barely noticed. My mind replayed Ethan's words over and over. "Don't let her take them away from you. Not take them away from me. Not take them away from us. Take them away from you." The wording mattered. It meant he knew something specific, something dangerous, something connected to the children. And judging by the fear in his eyes, he believed the threat was real. What I didn't know was just how real. Because only a few weeks later, Vanessa would stop hiding her intentions completely. And the battle that had been building quietly inside our family would finally explode into the open, inside a courtroom. 3 weeks after Ethan's accident, my life changed with the sound of a knock on the front door. It was a Tuesday morning. I was watering flowers on my porch when a man in a gray suit walked up my driveway carrying a folder. At first, I assumed he was selling something. Maybe insurance, maybe home repairs. Instead, he asked a question that instantly made my stomach drop. "Brooklyn Reed." "Yes." He handed me an envelope. "You've been served." The world seemed to stop. "What?" The man offered a polite nod. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. No explanation, no warning, nothing. I stood frozen on the porch staring at the envelope. My hands were already shaking. Deep down, I knew. Before opening it, I knew. This was Vanessa. Inside were legal documents, several pages, official stamps, court information, accusations. By the time I reached the second page, I could barely breathe. Vanessa was requesting a court order limiting my contact with Sophie and Liam. According to the filing, I was emotionally manipulative. According to the filing, I undermined parental authority. According to the filing, I created emotional distress for the children. According to the filing, I was a threat to family stability. I read the pages again, then again, then again. The words never changed, yet they still felt impossible. How could anyone believe this? How could Vanessa write these things? How could she look at everything I had done for those children and turn it into something ugly? I sank into a chair. The documents slipped from my hands. For nearly an hour, I simply sat there, staring, numb. The pain wasn't anger, not at first. It was grief, pure grief, because the accusations themselves weren't what hurt most. What hurt was realizing Vanessa was trying to erase me completely, not just reduce contact, not just create distance. Erase me. Remove me from the children's lives as though I had never existed. As though all those birthdays, holidays, school plays, bedtime stories, and years of love meant nothing. The phone rang. It was Carol. The moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. Brooklyn. They served me. Silence, then. Oh my God. I told her everything. Every accusation, every claim, every lie. By the end of the conversation, even Carol sounded shaken. This is insane. I know. You need a lawyer. The word lawyer made everything feel even more real. Courtrooms belonged in other people's stories, not mine, not our family. Yet here we were. That evening I tried calling Ethan, again, and again, and again. No answer. Eventually I left a voicemail. Ethan, please call me. My voice cracked. I just need to understand. No response came. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the day after that. The silence hurt almost as much as the lawsuit. Then 4 days later, I finally received a text. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from Vanessa. Please direct all communication through legal channels. I stared at the message. Cold, formal, cruel. The wording felt deliberate, like a business transaction. Not a family. Not people who had once shared Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A week later, I attended my first meeting with an attorney. His name was Daniel Foster. He was in his early 50s, with kind eyes and a calm voice. The moment he finished reading the documents, he removed his glasses and sighed. These are serious allegations. I know. Are they true? The question didn't offend me. It had to be asked. No. He studied my face for several seconds, then nodded. I believe you. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of relief. Someone believed me. Daniel spent nearly 2 hours asking questions. About my relationship with the children, about Vanessa, about Ethan, about every interaction from the past several years. I told him everything. The restrictions, the secret calls, Sophie's letter, Liam's questions, the birthday party, the hospital, especially the hospital. When I repeated Ethan's words, "Don't let her take them away from you." Daniel immediately sat forward. What exactly did he mean? I don't know. But you believe he was referring to the children? Yes. Daniel wrote something in his notebook, then nodded thoughtfully. The meeting ended with a long list of things he wanted. Messages, emails, photos, witness names. Anything that documented my relationship with Sophie and Liam. For the next several days, I gathered everything, and there was a lot. Thousands of photographs, birthday cards, school programs, vacation pictures, handwritten notes, drawings the children had made over the years. Every item reminded me of what I stood to lose. Every memory became evidence. That realization broke my heart. Love shouldn't have to be proven. Yet here I was preparing exhibits to demonstrate that I loved my grandchildren. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued building her case, and her methods became increasingly aggressive. Daniel eventually obtained copies of several pieces of evidence she planned to present. The first made me physically sick. Screenshots of text messages supposedly sent by me. Only they weren't complete. Entire portions had been removed. Conversations had been edited. Context had vanished. A harmless discussion about parenting suddenly looked critical and hostile. A loving conversation appeared controlling. A joke appeared threatening. The manipulation was obvious once you saw the originals, but anyone looking at those screenshots alone might believe Vanessa's version. The discovery terrified me because lies become dangerous when they're wrapped inside partial truths. Then came witness statements. Some were from acquaintances I barely knew, people connected to Vanessa, people who had never spent meaningful time around me. Yet somehow, they were prepared to describe me as controlling, manipulative, obsessive. I couldn't understand it until Daniel explained. People believe the story they're told. The words hit hard because they were true. Vanessa wasn't just fighting me. She was controlling the narrative, and she had been doing it for a long time. The more evidence we reviewed, the clearer it became. She hadn't filed this lawsuit impulsively. She had been preparing, planning, building every restriction, every accusation, every altered message, every story, all leading to this moment. Then one evening, Daniel called unexpectedly. His voice sounded serious. "Brooklyn, what is it? I need you to prepare yourself." My stomach tightened immediately. "For what?" "There's a good chance Vanessa intends to portray you as emotionally unstable." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Why stop at controlling? Why stop at manipulative? Why not unstable too? The accusation felt almost laughable, if it weren't so cruel. "Do you think people will believe her?" Daniel was quiet for several seconds. Then he answered honestly. "Some might." The truth hurt, but I appreciated it, because false accusations don't need to be believable to cause damage. They only need to create doubt. And doubt was exactly what Vanessa wanted. That night I sat alone in my living room holding Sophie's letter. The same letter I had read dozens of times, maybe hundreds. I focused on one sentence. "Please don't give up on us." The words steadied me, because suddenly I realized something. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about Vanessa anymore. It was about Sophie. It was about Liam. Two children caught in the middle of something they never asked for. Two children who needed someone willing to fight for them. No matter how ugly things became, no matter how painful, no matter how expensive, no matter how frightening. And judging by the evidence Daniel was uncovering, things were about to become far uglier than I imagined. Because somewhere beneath Vanessa's lies was a secret, a real secret, one powerful enough to make her desperate, one powerful enough to risk everything. And soon, Daniel Foster would uncover the first piece of it. The first thing Daniel Foster taught me was that truth alone doesn't win legal battles. Evidence does. That lesson was difficult to accept. For 67 years, I had believed honesty should be enough. If you told the truth, people listened. If you did the right thing, eventually things worked out. But family court wasn't built on assumptions. It was built on proof. And if I wanted any chance of protecting my relationship with Sophie and Liam, we needed proof. Lots of it. The morning after our meeting, Daniel sent me a long email. It contained a list of everything he wanted collected. Text messages, emails, photographs, school records, witnesses, phone logs, anything that could demonstrate the nature of my relationship with the children. At first, the task felt overwhelming. Then I remembered Sophie's letter. "Please don't give up on us." That became my motivation. Every photograph I sorted, every text I printed, every memory I documented, I did it for them, not for me. For them. Over the next 2 weeks, my dining room transformed into a war room. Boxes filled with family photographs covered the table. Folders lined the counters. Stacks of printed messages occupied nearly every available surface. Some nights I worked until 2 a.m. Other nights I cried halfway through sorting pictures. Because every image reminded me of what was at stake. There was Sophie at age 5, proudly holding a blue ribbon from a science fair. Liam covered in mud after our fishing trip, Christmas mornings, pumpkin patches, birthday parties, school concerts, years of love captured in thousands of moments. Daniel reviewed everything carefully. One afternoon he called me. "Brooklyn." "Yes." "I found something interesting." Immediately my pulse quickened. "What?" "The timeline." "What about it?" He paused. "The accusations don't match reality." That got my attention. "Explain." Daniel began walking me through the evidence. According to Vanessa's legal filing, I had become increasingly controlling over the previous year. But the messages told a different story. A very different story. The records showed me repeatedly asking permission before visits, repeatedly accepting canceled plans, repeatedly trying to avoid conflict. In fact, most conversations revealed exactly the opposite of what Vanessa claimed. I wasn't demanding access. I was being denied access. The distinction mattered. A lot. For the first time, I felt genuine hope. Maybe the truth really could be proven. Then another breakthrough arrived. This one came from Rebecca Miller, Sophie's teacher. Daniel requested a formal meeting. Rebecca agreed immediately. I attended as well. The meeting took place after school in an empty classroom. Sunlight filtered through the windows as Rebecca described everything she had observed. "Sophie loves her grandmother." The statement sounded simple, yet hearing it from a neutral adult carried enormous weight. Rebecca continued. "She talks about Brooklyn constantly." Daniel nodded. "Has Sophie ever expressed fear of her grandmother?" "Never." "Concern?" "No." "Discomfort?" "No." Rebecca didn't hesitate once. Every answer strengthened our case. Then she shared something neither Daniel nor I expected. "There were several occasions when Sophie became upset after family-related conversations." I sat forward. "What kind of conversations?" Rebecca chose her words carefully. "The kind where she felt caught in the middle?" My heart sank, because that was exactly what I had feared. Sophie wasn't merely witnessing family conflict. She was carrying it. A 12-year-old child was carrying burdens that belonged to adults. The realization made me sick. After the meeting, Daniel seemed encouraged. "She's an excellent witness." "Do you think she'll testify?" "I think she will." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to imagine a positive outcome. Not victory, just fairness, just someone finally listening. A few days later, another witness came forward. Carol Jenkins. Unlike Rebecca, Carol wasn't cautious. Carol was furious. She marched into Daniel's office carrying a folder nearly as thick as mine. "I documented everything." Daniel blinked. "Everything?" "Everything." Carol wasn't exaggerating. Over the past year, she had kept notes, dates, conversations, observations. Nothing dramatic, nothing invasive. Just the natural habits of a retired woman who paid attention to the people around her. One entry immediately stood out: the day of Liam's birthday. Carol had written down exactly what she witnessed. The gifts, the confrontation, the refusal to let me inside. Even Sophie's appearance at the upstairs window. Daniel read the notes carefully, then smiled for the first time all afternoon. "This is useful." Carol folded her arms. "Good." Then her expression hardened. "Those children love Brooklyn." Nobody disagreed. The more witnesses we gathered, the clearer the picture became. Vanessa's narrative wasn't matching reality. Not with teachers, not with neighbors, not with documented communication, not with years of family history. Still, we had a major problem. Vanessa's altered text messages. The screenshots looked convincing, dangerously convincing. Daniel believed they could influence a judge if left unchallenged. Fortunately, technology had an answer. A digital forensics specialist reviewed the records. The process took nearly 2 weeks. The waiting was torture. Then the report arrived, and everything changed. I still remember Daniel's grin when he called. "Brooklyn, what happened?" "We got her." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "The screenshots." My heart started racing. "What about them?" "They've been altered." Relief crashed through me so powerfully I had to sit down. The expert had recovered original message threads. Entire sections had been removed. Statements had been taken out of context. In some cases, timestamps had been manipulated. The report was devastating. Not to me, to Vanessa. For the first time, we possessed proof that part of her evidence had been intentionally misleading. The discovery strengthened Daniel's confidence dramatically. Mine too. Yet even as our case improved, another question continued bothering us. Why was Vanessa doing all this control alone? Didn't explain everything. Jealousy didn't explain everything. There was something missing, a hidden motive, something powerful enough to justify years of manipulation. Daniel felt it too. One evening, we stayed late reviewing documents. Most people would have gone home hours earlier. Instead, we sat surrounded by paperwork, searching, analyzing, looking for patterns. Suddenly, Daniel frowned. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped through several financial records. Then he looked at me. "Brooklyn." "Yes." "Tell me about the education fund." I blinked. "What education fund?" "The one you created for Sophie and Liam." My stomach tightened. Very few people knew about it. Years earlier, after Richard's death, I had invested a portion of his life insurance money. The account was specifically designated for my grandchildren's future education. College, trade school, whatever path they chose. I never discussed the details publicly. I certainly never used it as leverage. "Why?" Daniel tapped a document. "Because Vanessa seems unusually interested in it." A chill traveled through my body. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet." His eyes narrowed. "But I intend to find out." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel added quietly, "I think we're finally getting close to the real reason behind all of this." I drove home that night with my mind racing. The education fund, money, arguments, Ethan's stress, Vanessa's behavior. Pieces that once seemed unrelated were starting to connect. And for the first time, I sensed something much larger hiding beneath the surface. Something that had nothing to do with protecting children. Something that had everything to do with secrets. The problem was that we still didn't know exactly what those secrets were. But Daniel was digging deeper. And soon, he would uncover information so shocking that even I would struggle to believe it. Information that would finally reveal Vanessa's true motive. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It never does. Instead, it arrived in pieces. A document here, a bank statement there, a conversation that suddenly made sense, a clue hidden in plain sight. And when those pieces finally came together, I discovered something that shocked me more than every lie Vanessa had told about me. The battle had never really been about me. Not completely. It was about money. 3 days after our conversation about the education fund, Daniel called and asked me to come to his office immediately. His voice carried an urgency I hadn't heard before. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "I think we found the missing piece." My heart began pounding. An hour later, I was sitting across from him in the conference room. Several folders covered the table. Financial records, loan documents, credit reports. The sheer volume of paperwork made me nervous. Daniel pushed one folder toward me. "Start here." I opened it. The first page meant nothing to me. The second page confused me. By the third page, my stomach was in knots. Credit card debt, large amounts, very large amounts. "What am I looking at?" Daniel folded his hands. "Vanessa's financial records." I stared at him. "How did you get these?" "Legally." He pointed toward several highlighted sections. Look closely. I did. The numbers were staggering. Multiple credit cards, personal loans, missed payments, refinancing attempts, high-interest debt. Some accounts had balances large enough to make my head spin. This can't be right. I'm afraid it is. I looked again and again. The numbers didn't change. What does Ethan know? Daniel's expression darkened. That's the interesting question. The room suddenly felt colder. What do you mean? Daniel slid another document across the table. A separate account, different institution, different records. This time, the debt appeared under Vanessa's name alone. Not joint accounts, not family accounts, hidden accounts, secret accounts. I felt sick. Ethan didn't know. We can't prove that yet. But you think he didn't? Daniel nodded slowly. I think there's a strong possibility. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Everything started connecting. Ethan's stress, the refinancing questions Carol mentioned, the arguments, the exhaustion, the fear, the pressure. All of it suddenly made sense. A man carrying burdens he couldn't fully explain. A man trying desperately to hold together a family while standing on financial quicksand. And Vanessa had hidden it from him, or at least part of it. Daniel wasn't finished. There is more. Those 3 words instantly made my pulse quicken. More? How could there possibly be more? He opened another folder. Inside were emails, legal correspondence, financial planning documents. Then I saw a familiar name. Mine. My stomach dropped. What is this? Daniel pointed toward a specific section. The education fund. The room became completely silent. I looked down at the paperwork. Years ago, after Richard died, I had established educational trusts for Sophie and Liam. The funds weren't enormous, but they were substantial. Enough to help both children attend college without crushing debt. Richard would have wanted that. So would I. The accounts were carefully structured, protected, accessible only under specific conditions. The children were the beneficiaries. No one else. At least that was how I understood it. What does this have to do with Vanessa? Daniel exhaled slowly. We found evidence she consulted an attorney last year. My pulse quickened. About what? The trusts. For a moment, I thought I'd misunderstood. The education funds? Yes. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. Why? Daniel looked directly into my eyes. Because she wanted access. The words landed like a bomb. I sat frozen, trying to make sense of them. That's impossible. It wasn't impossible. His voice remained calm. Just difficult. Suddenly, memories began flooding back. Conversations I had dismissed, questions that once seemed innocent, comments I barely noticed. Vanessa asking about account structures. Vanessa asking who controlled distributions. Vanessa asking what would happen if something happened to me. At the time, I assumed she was being responsible, a parent planning for the future. Now those conversations looked very different, very different. My chest tightened. You think that's why she's doing this? Daniel leaned back. I think it's part of it. Part of it, not all of it. But enough. I stared at the documents. Years of manipulation suddenly took on a new shape. This wasn't merely about jealousy. It wasn't simply about control. It was about access, power, influence. The ability to control every aspect of the children's future, including money intended specifically for them. And if I remained involved, if I maintained a close relationship with Sophie and Liam, that became harder, much harder, because the children trusted me, because I understood the accounts, because I wouldn't allow them to be exploited. The realization made me physically ill. Daniel continued. There are additional issues. Of course there were. There always were. What now? He opened another file. This one contained spending records, travel expenses, luxury purchases, designer items, vacation charges. The totals were breathtaking. Not because wealthy people can't spend money, because Ethan and Vanessa weren't wealthy. At least not wealthy enough for this. What am I looking at? Daniel tapped several entries. Patterns. I frowned. What kind of patterns? The kind that create debt. For the next 30 minutes, he walked me through everything. One transaction after another. One financial decision after another. Each one painted the same picture. Vanessa wasn't struggling because of bad luck. She wasn't facing hardship because of a medical emergency. She wasn't drowning because of circumstances. She was drowning because of choices, repeated choices, expensive choices, secret choices, choices Ethan might not fully understand. By the time the meeting ended, I felt emotionally exhausted. But the biggest shock was still waiting. As I gathered my things, Daniel spoke again. There's one more reason I believe this matters. I paused. What? His expression turned serious. People who are desperate become dangerous. A chill moved through me. What are you saying? I'm saying someone carrying this level of debt may do things they wouldn't normally do. The implication was impossible to miss. Manipulate evidence, control narratives, lie, isolate. Use children as leverage. Everything suddenly fit, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to reveal motive. Enough to explain desperation. Enough to explain why Vanessa seemed willing to destroy relationships that had existed for over a decade. That night, I drove home feeling numb. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple. Ordinarily, I would have admired it. Instead, I barely noticed. I kept thinking about Sophie, about Liam, about Ethan. Most of all, Ethan, because for months I had been asking the wrong question. I kept asking why Vanessa hated me. The real question was different. What was Vanessa afraid of? Now, I finally had an answer. She was afraid of losing control. Control of the story. Control of the children. Control of the future. Control of the money. And people terrified of losing control often make mistakes. Big mistakes. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Just one sentence. We received the preliminary witness list. My stomach tightened. I immediately called him. Anything important? His voice sounded almost stunned. Yes. What? There was a long pause. Then he answered. Ethan's name is on it. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. What? Vanessa intends to call Ethan as a witness. The world seemed to stop. Because suddenly everything changed. If Ethan testified for Vanessa, our case could collapse. But if Ethan finally told the truth, everything Vanessa had built could come crashing down. And for the first time, I realized the entire future of our family might depend on one man finding the courage to speak. My son. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I was prepared for. No matter how many times I told myself I was ready, I wasn't. Because some battles are different when they're fought against strangers. This one was against family. The courthouse stood in downtown Columbus, a cold stone building that seemed far more intimidating than I remembered. As Daniel and I walked through the front doors that morning, my stomach twisted into knots. I barely slept the night before. Every possible outcome had played through my mind. What if the judge believed Vanessa? What if Sophie's letter wasn't enough? What if Ethan testified against me? What if this was the day I lost my grandchildren forever? The fear sat heavily in my chest. Daniel noticed. You okay? I forced a smile. No. He laughed softly. That's honest. I don't think I've ever been this scared. His expression softened. Good people usually are. I looked at him. What does that mean? It means you still understand what's at stake? The answer stayed with me as we entered the courtroom. Everything felt surreal. The wooden benches, the flags, the court clerk organizing files, the low hum of whispered conversations. For a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own life, like someone else's tragedy had somehow become mine. Then I saw Vanessa, and every illusion disappeared. She sat at the opposite table, wearing a navy blue dress. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was flawless. To anyone watching, she looked composed, respectable, even vulnerable. The image had clearly been chosen carefully. Her attorney sat beside her reviewing documents. Vanessa occasionally nodded while pretending to wipe away tears. The performance had already begun. My heart sank, because I knew exactly how convincing she could be. Years earlier, I had fallen for that same charm. The sweet smiles, the polite words, the carefully controlled emotions. Back when I believed she loved our family. Then my eyes searched the room for Ethan. He wasn't there. A sharp pain pierced my chest. I tried not to overreact. The hearing hadn't started yet. People were still arriving, but the empty seat beside Vanessa felt impossible to ignore. Daniel noticed my expression. Ethan may arrive later. Or he may not. Daniel didn't answer, because we both understood what was at stake. A few minutes later, the courtroom doors opened again. Judge Margaret Collins entered. The room immediately stood. I'd never met her before. She appeared to be in her 60s, calm, serious, observant, the kind of person who noticed details. I prayed that instinct was right. The hearing began, and almost immediately I understood why Daniel had warned me. Vanessa's attorney was skilled, very skilled. He didn't portray Vanessa as angry. He portrayed her as frightened, a mother desperately trying to protect her children, a woman forced into difficult decisions, a victim. Listening to his opening statement was one of the hardest experiences of my life, because he wasn't describing me. Yet he was. According to his version of events, I was controlling, manipulative, obsessed with access to the children, unable to respect parental boundaries. Every sentence felt like another stone added to my chest. I wanted to stand up, to shout that none of it was true. But Daniel had warned me. Stay calm, let the process work, trust the evidence. So I sat silently and listened. Then Vanessa took the stand. The performance became even more convincing. At first, she appeared emotional. Her voice trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. Several times she paused as though struggling to continue. The judge watched carefully. So did I. Vanessa described herself as a mother under constant pressure, a mother trying to create stability, a mother dealing with interference. Then she described me, or rather the fictional version of me she had created. According to Vanessa, I constantly challenged her authority. According to Vanessa, I encouraged the children to ignore rules. According to Vanessa, I created conflict between family members. The lies came one after another, smoothly, effortlessly, as though she had rehearsed them. Maybe she had. What hurt most wasn't hearing the accusations. It was realizing how many people in the room appeared to believe them. I glanced toward the judge. Judge Collins remained expressionless, taking notes, listening, watching, giving away nothing. That uncertainty terrified me. Then Vanessa's attorney introduced the text messages, the altered screenshots. I felt my pulse spike. Even knowing they had been manipulated, seeing them displayed in court was unsettling. Without context, they looked terrible. A conversation about parenting appeared confrontational. A discussion about scheduling appeared controlling. Everything had been twisted, carefully, deliberately. Vanessa's attorney emphasized each message, one after another, building a narrative, building doubt, building fear. For a moment, I honestly wondered whether we were losing. Daniel remained calm. Too calm. I couldn't understand why. Then Vanessa was asked a question that changed the atmosphere slightly. "Why are you seeking this order now?" The answer came instantly. "Because I'm protecting my children." The statement sounded perfect, almost too perfect. Judge Collins looked up. "From what specifically?" For the first time all morning, Vanessa hesitated, only briefly. But I noticed. So did Daniel. The hesitation lasted barely a second, yet it was there. Then she continued. "Emotional harm." The judge wrote something down. No reaction, no indication of what she was thinking. Just notes. Always notes. By lunchtime, I felt emotionally exhausted. The hearing paused briefly. Daniel and I stepped into the hallway. I leaned against a wall, trying to breathe, trying not to panic. "She sounds convincing." Daniel nodded. "That's because she's practiced." The answer didn't comfort me. "What if the judge believes her?" He looked directly at me. "Brooklyn." "What?" "Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then stop focusing on what has happened so far." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel smiled. "A good trial isn't won during opening attacks." I stared at him. He lowered his voice. "It's won when the truth finally enters the room." The confidence in his tone surprised me, almost as though he knew something I didn't. Then I realized what that something was. We hadn't presented our case yet. Not really. Vanessa had spoken. Her attorney had spoken. But Rebecca hadn't testified. Carol hadn't testified. The forensic evidence hadn't been introduced. The financial records hadn't been discussed. Sophie's letter hadn't been shown. And most importantly, Ethan still hadn't appeared. The afternoon session began. My anxiety returned immediately. Every time the courtroom door opened, I glanced toward it. Every time. Still no Ethan. The empty seat beside Vanessa remained empty, hour after hour. Until finally, just as the judge prepared to move into the next phase of testimony, the courtroom doors opened one more time. A man stepped inside. My breath caught. Ethan. He looked thinner than before, more tired, but he was there. Vanessa turned around. The moment she saw him, something flashed across her face. Not relief, not happiness, fear, real fear. It vanished almost instantly. Yet I saw it, and so did Daniel. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, Vanessa looked genuinely nervous. And deep down, I knew why. Because Ethan was the one person in that courtroom who knew both versions of the story. The version Vanessa wanted everyone to hear. And the version she had spent years trying to hide. The moment Ethan walked into that courtroom, everything changed. I felt it. Daniel felt it. Even Vanessa felt it. For the first time all day, the confidence she had carefully maintained began to crack. Not dramatically, just enough. A slight tightening around her eyes. A brief hesitation. A glance she couldn't quite hide. Fear? Real fear? Ethan quietly took a seat behind the attorneys. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Vanessa. He simply sat down and stared forward. The courtroom seemed to grow quieter, as if everyone sensed something important was about to happen. Judge Collins resumed the hearing. Now it was our turn. Daniel stood. For the first time that day, I saw complete confidence in his expression. Not arrogance, certainty. He knew what was coming, and apparently so did Vanessa. The first witness was Rebecca Miller, Sophie's teacher. Rebecca walked to the stand calmly, professional, measured, credible, exactly the kind of witness judges trust. Daniel began gently. "Miss Miller, how long have you known Sophie Reed?" 2 years. "And during those 2 years, did Sophie ever speak about her grandmother, Brooklyn Reed?" Rebecca smiled. "Frequently." "How would you describe those conversations?" "Affectionate." The answer echoed through the courtroom. Daniel continued. Did Sophie appear fearful of her grandmother? No. Did she ever describe her grandmother as harmful? Never. Did she appear emotionally attached to her grandmother? Very much. Vanessa's attorney objected several times. Each objection was overruled. The testimony continued. Then Daniel introduced Sophie's letter. The courtroom became silent. Rebecca explained how Sophie had hidden it inside schoolwork, how she had asked for help, how concerned she appeared. Judge Collins carefully read every page, every word. I watched her expression closely. She didn't reveal much, but she read the letter twice. That mattered. Then Daniel asked one final question. In your professional opinion, did Sophie appear distressed by the separation from her grandmother? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer hung heavily in the room. When Rebecca stepped down, I noticed Judge Collins making several notes. Many notes. More than before. Next came Carol Jenkins, and Carol was magnificent. Unlike Rebecca's calm professionalism, Carol brought something else. Truth wrapped in emotion. She described years of observing our family, birthday parties, school events, holidays, ordinary life. Then she described Liam's birthday. The courtroom listened carefully. Carol recounted everything. The unopened gifts, the closed door, Liam being called away, Sophie standing at the upstairs window, the refusal to let me inside. When she finished, the room felt different. The story Vanessa had spent months building was beginning to collapse. Brick by brick. Then came the forensic specialist. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Unlike emotional testimony, this was cold, technical, objective, and devastating. The expert displayed the text messages, the originals, then the altered versions, side by side. The differences were undeniable. Entire sections had been removed. Context had disappeared. Meaning had been distorted. The expert explained exactly how the modifications were discovered, exactly how the manipulation occurred, exactly why the screenshots were misleading. Ethan looked toward Vanessa. For several seconds, neither moved. Then he looked back at the judge and finally spoke. I didn't know everything. The sentence made my heart race. The exact words Sophie had written. Dad doesn't know everything. Now everyone understood. Daniel nodded. What didn't you know? Ethan exhaled slowly. The debt. The room went completely silent. I discovered accounts I didn't know existed. Vanessa lowered her head. I discovered loans. Another pause. Credit cards. Another pause. And financial consultations regarding my children's education funds. Judge Collins stopped writing. For the first time all day, she looked directly at Ethan without taking notes. Listening carefully, very carefully. Daniel spoke softly. How did that affect your marriage? Ethan laughed bitterly. The sound broke my heart. It destroyed trust. The honesty was painful, raw, real. Then came the final blow, the statement that changed everything. Daniel asked one last question. Mr. Reed, did your wife ever threaten consequences if you opposed her decisions regarding your mother? The courtroom froze. Everyone seemed to stop breathing, even Vanessa. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. When he answered, his voice shook. Yes. A collective silence fell over the room. What kind of consequences? His next words shattered whatever remained of Vanessa's case. She threatened to take the children and leave Ohio. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Ethan wiped his eyes, then continued. She knew I was afraid. His voice cracked. She knew how much I loved my kids. Tears now streamed freely down his face, and she knew I'd do almost anything to keep them close. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed frozen in grief. Not anger. Grief. The grief of a family breaking apart. The grief of years lost. the grief of children caught in the middle. When Ethan finally stepped down from the witness stand, the room felt completely different. Vanessa's story was gone, destroyed, not by revenge, not by strategy, by truth. And as Judge Collins reviewed her notes one final time, I realized something important. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid anymore, because the judge had finally heard the whole story. And judging by the expression on her face, the decision she was about to make would change all of our lives forever. I had imagined that if the truth ever came out, I would feel victorious. I was wrong. As I sat inside that courtroom listening to Ethan's testimony, victory was the last thing I felt. What I felt was heartbreak, because every truth he revealed came with a cost. Every admission exposed another wound inside our family. Every answer revealed just how much suffering had been hidden behind closed doors. And the worst part was knowing that Sophie and Liam had been living in the middle of it. Judge Collins called for a short recess after Ethan's testimony. The courtroom slowly emptied. Attorneys gathered documents. Witnesses whispered to one another. People stretched their legs and headed toward the hallway. I remained seated, unable to move, unable to process everything I had just heard. For months, I had suspected something was wrong. For months, I had collected clues. But hearing Ethan confirm it publicly was different. The isolation, the manipulation, the threats, the financial deception. None of it had been imagined. None of it had been exaggerated. It was real. Daniel sat beside me. "You okay?" I laughed softly. The sound surprised even me. "No." He nodded. "That's understandable." I stared at the empty witness stand. "I keep thinking about the children." "So am I." The answer came quietly. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Daniel added something unexpected. "The judge is paying attention." I looked at him. "You think so?" "I know so." His confidence gave me a little comfort. Not much. Just enough. A few minutes later, the courtroom reconvened. Vanessa's attorney looked noticeably different. Less confident. More defensive. The shift was subtle, but impossible to miss. For the first time all day, they were reacting instead of controlling the narrative. Judge Collins returned to the bench. The final phase of testimony began. And then something happened that nobody expected. Vanessa requested permission to speak again. Her attorney looked surprised. Honestly, so did everyone else. After a brief discussion, Judge Collins allowed it. Vanessa returned to the witness stand. At first, she appeared composed, but I quickly noticed something different. The mask was slipping. The polished image she'd maintained throughout the hearing seemed harder to hold together now. The questions began. Most focused on Ethan's testimony. The financial records. The altered text messages. The education funds. One by one, the judge addressed the issues. Vanessa tried explaining. Tried justifying. Tried redirecting blame. But every answer seemed weaker than the last. Especially when discussing the education trusts. Judge Collins leaned forward. Mrs. Reed, why did you consult legal counsel regarding funds designated exclusively for the children?" Vanessa hesitated. The hesitation felt endless. Finally, she answered, "I was planning for their future." The judge's expression didn't change. "And why was this done without informing your husband?" No answer came immediately. The silence became uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Then Vanessa finally spoke. "I didn't think it mattered." The courtroom seemed to freeze. Even her own attorney looked uneasy. Judge Collins wrote something down. A long note, then another, and another. For the first time all day, I sensed where this was heading. Not because of any single answer, because of the pattern. Truth tends to remain consistent. Lies require maintenance. And Vanessa was struggling to maintain hers. The questioning continued. Eventually, the topic shifted toward the children. Specifically, Sophie. specifically Liam, and specifically their relationship with me. Judge Collins reviewed photographs, school records, birthday cards, handwritten letters. The evidence covered years, years of consistent involvement, years of love, years of presence. The judge studied everything carefully. Then she asked a question directly. Mrs. Reed, can you explain why you believed eliminating this relationship entirely was in the children's best interest? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For the first time since this hearing began, she looked completely unprepared, because there was no good answer. Not one supported by evidence, not one supported by witnesses, not one supported by the children themselves. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, she said, "I thought it was necessary." The answer sounded hollow. Even she seemed to know it. Judge Collins nodded slowly, then moved on. By late afternoon, closing arguments began. Vanessa's attorney went first. He tried, he truly did, but the energy had changed. The confidence was gone. The argument felt less like a case and more like damage control. Then Daniel stood. I will never forget what happened next, because he didn't attack Vanessa. He didn't insult her. He didn't dramatize anything. Instead, he told the truth, calmly, methodically, powerfully. He walked through every piece of evidence. The teacher's testimony, the neighbor's testimony, the manipulated messages, the financial records, Sophie's letter, Ethan's testimony. One piece at a time, building a picture. Not of a perfect family, but of a grandmother who loved her grandchildren, a father trapped between fear and loyalty, 2 children caught in adult conflict, and a mother who had crossed lines she should never have crossed. Then Daniel said something that made my eyes fill with tears. This case is not about access. The courtroom became silent. It is about connection. He paused. A loving relationship existed for years. Another pause. The evidence does not show harm. Another. It shows love. I lowered my head, unable to stop crying. Not because we had won, not yet, because someone finally understood. Someone had finally said out loud what this battle was really about. Love, nothing more, nothing less. When Daniel finished, the courtroom fell silent. Judge Collins reviewed her notes, page after page, minute after minute. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The tension became unbearable. Finally, she looked up and began speaking. Her voice was calm, measured, authoritative. She carefully summarized the evidence, the testimony, the concerns, the inconsistencies. Every word felt important. Every sentence mattered. Then she addressed Vanessa directly. The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Judge Collins spoke slowly. Parents have tremendous authority. Vanessa nodded slightly. But authority is not ownership. The sentence landed like thunder. I saw Vanessa's face go pale. Judge Collins continued. Children are not tools. Silence. They are not leverage. More silence. And they should never be isolated from loving family members without compelling evidence. My hands trembled. I could barely breathe. The judge wasn't finished. She reviewed the manipulated messages, the credibility concerns, the testimony of multiple witnesses, the evidence regarding the children's emotional attachment to me. Then she looked directly at Vanessa, and everything became clear. The decision was coming. After nearly 2 years of pain, after months of fear, after countless sleepless nights, the moment had finally arrived. And judging by the expression on Judge Collins' face, the ruling would be far more significant than anyone expected. I will never forget the silence that filled the courtroom after Judge Collins finished speaking. It wasn't the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence that comes when everyone realizes a turning point has arrived. Years of tension, months of fear, countless sleepless nights. All of it had led to this moment. Judge Collins set down her pen and looked directly at Vanessa. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds no justification for completely severing the relationship between Brooklyn Reed and her grandchildren. My eyes immediately filled with tears. I had prepared myself for disappointment, for compromise, for some partial victory. I had not prepared myself to hear those words. Judge Collins continued. The court is deeply concerned by evidence showing attempts to isolate the children from a significant family relationship. Vanessa stared at the table, motionless. The judge wasn't finished. The court is equally concerned by the manipulation of evidence and the level of conflict these children have been exposed to. The room remained silent. Every word mattered. Every word carried weight. Then came the ruling. Brooklyn Reed would be granted structured visitation rights. The children's relationship with their grandmother would be protected. Additional family evaluations would be conducted. Counseling was strongly recommended. And all future decisions would prioritize the emotional well-being of Sophie and Liam. I closed my eyes. Relief washed over me so powerfully, I nearly lost my balance. Not because I had won, because the children had. For the first time in a very long time, someone had looked beyond the accusations, beyond the lies, beyond the power struggle. Someone had looked at what Sophie and Liam actually needed. And that made all the difference. Then something happened that none of us expected. A small voice broke the silence. Your Honor. Everyone turned. Sophie. She was sitting beside a court-appointed family advocate. I hadn't even noticed her tears. Now, they streamed freely down her face. Judge Collins softened immediately. Yes, Sophie. The entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Sophie looked toward me, then toward Ethan, then finally at the judge. Her voice trembled, but every word was clear. Grandma never stopped loving us. No one moved. No one spoke. I saw tears appear in the eyes of people throughout the courtroom, even court staff, even attorneys, because everyone understood what that little girl was really saying. She wasn't talking about court orders. She wasn't talking about evidence. She was talking about love. Simple, uncomplicated, unconditional love. The kind children remember forever. Judge Collins nodded gently. Thank you, Sophie. The hearing ended shortly afterward. People gathered their papers. Attorneys shook hands. Witnesses quietly left. But I remained seated, unable to move. Unable to believe it was finally over. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Ethan. I looked up. His eyes were red, so were mine. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. There simply weren't enough words. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry. The sentence broke me. Not because I needed an apology, because I knew how much pain it had cost him to say it. I stood and hugged him. Tightly. The way I used to when he was a little boy. The way mothers do when words aren't enough. You don't have to do this alone anymore, I whispered. His shoulders shook. For the first time in years, I felt my son stop carrying the weight of the world by himself. It wasn't a complete healing, not yet. But it was a beginning, and beginnings matter. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. No dramatic crowd gathered. No television cameras appeared. The world continued exactly as it always had. Only our world had changed. Over the following months, life didn't magically become perfect. Real life never works that way. Healing is slower than damage. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it takes to destroy. But little by little, things improved. The court required family counseling. At first, everyone resisted, especially Vanessa. But eventually she participated, not because she wanted to, because she had to. Something surprising happened during those sessions. For the first time, Vanessa began confronting her own behavior. The fear, the insecurity, the need for control, the financial decisions, the damage caused by years of resentment. It wasn't an overnight transformation, far from it, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is enough. Ethan also changed, perhaps more than anyone. For years, he had lived in survival mode, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to avoid conflict, trying to hold together a family that was quietly falling apart. Now he began learning something new: boundaries, honesty, courage. Slowly, he became stronger, not harder, stronger. There is a difference. The biggest changes, however, came from Sophie and Liam. The first supervised visit after the hearing remains one of the happiest memories of my life. I arrived 30 minutes early, nervous, excited, terrified something would go wrong. Then I saw them, running toward me, not walking, running. Grandma. The sound nearly shattered my heart. Sophie reached me first, then Liam. Both wrapped their arms around me at the same time. For several seconds, none of us spoke. We simply held each other. 3 people who had spent too long apart. 3 people finally allowed to be a family again. That afternoon we talked, laughed, played games, ate ice cream. Nothing extraordinary, just ordinary moments. The very moments that had been stolen from us. And suddenly, I understood something. Ordinary moments are often the most valuable moments of all. Months turned into a year. The supervision requirements eventually ended. Family relationships stabilized. The children visited regularly. School events returned. Birthdays returned. Holiday traditions returned. Not exactly as before. Some things never return exactly as before. But they returned in new ways, healthier ways, more honest ways. Then one afternoon, nearly 18 months after the court hearing, Sophie asked if she could show me something. We were sitting in my living room. Liam was outside chasing the dog. The house felt peaceful, safe. Sophie disappeared upstairs for several minutes. When she returned, she carried a small wooden box. The box looked old, carefully protected, treasured. She placed it in my lap. "What's this?" "Open it." I lifted the lid and immediately started crying. Inside were dozens of letters. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, postcards, notes. Every single piece of mail I had sent over the years, even during the months Vanessa tried separating us. I looked up, unable to speak. "Sophie," she smiled through tears. "I kept all of them." My voice broke. "Why?" Her answer was simple, beautiful, and unforgettable. "Because they reminded me that someone was always fighting for us." The room became quiet. I held one of the cards in my hand, a card I had mailed years earlier, a card I assumed might have been thrown away. Instead, it had been saved, protected, treasured, just like our relationship. In that moment, I realized something important. The court hearing had never truly been about winning. It had never been about proving I was right. It had never been about defeating Vanessa. It was about refusing to abandon the people I loved, even when it became difficult, even when it became painful, even when it seemed hopeless. Love isn't control. Love isn't ownership. Love doesn't isolate. Love stays. Love fights. Love waits. And love never stops showing up, no matter how many doors get closed, because sometimes on the other side of those doors, a child is waiting, hoping, believing, holding on to every letter, waiting for proof that they were never forgotten. And thankfully, Sophie and Liam never were. One of the deepest lessons I learned from this journey is that love is not measured by convenience. Anyone can love when relationships are easy, when doors are open, and when family gatherings are filled with laughter. The true test of love comes when misunderstandings arise, when accusations are made, when people try to push you away, and when giving up seems easier than continuing to fight. Real love stays. Real love remains patient. Real love refuses to disappear even when it is not welcomed. I also learned that children see far more than adults realize. They may not understand every argument or every legal document, but they understand who consistently shows up for them. They remember the people who make them feel safe, valued, and loved. The words we speak may fade, but the way we make children feel can stay with them for a lifetime. Another powerful lesson is that truth may be delayed, but it is rarely defeated forever. Lies can create confusion. Manipulation can distort reality. Fear can silence good people for a season, but eventually truth has a way of finding its voice. Sometimes it comes through evidence, sometimes it comes through courage, and sometimes it comes through the simple honesty of a child who refuses to stop loving the people who love them. Most importantly, this story reminds us that family is not about control. It is not about ownership, power, or winning. Family is about connection. It is about forgiveness when possible, accountability when necessary, and protecting the bonds that help us survive life's hardest seasons. Even broken relationships can begin to heal when honesty finally replaces fear. If you are going through a difficult family situation right now, I hope this story reminds you not to lose faith too quickly. Keep your heart open. Keep your integrity intact. Continue being the person you would be proud to see reflected in the people you love. Sometimes the results take longer than we want, but love, patience, and truth are stronger than they appear in the darkest moments. Before you go, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a family conflict where someone tried to come between loved ones? What lesson touched your heart the most in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them and love hearing your perspectives. And if this story moved, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining our community. Your support helps bring more meaningful stories like this to life. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and wherever you're watching from, I hope you have a peaceful and blessed day.